Hi everyone, it's great to see so many people here. Apologies in advance for my accent. I do hope that you've watched. Who's watched Neighbours? You've heard me to Home and Away. Okay, so just tune into that. But do let me know if I say something weird or in a very odd fashion. Anyway, starting an academic blog. I was just saying to Nadine, to be honest with you, it's a sort of session that I really avoid doing inside my own university. I only ever do it when I go travelling. I'm not sure why that is. I think it's because it's such a big topic. It's so immense. It takes so long to learn, and you learn on the job, if you like. That one workshop, 1 hour, I can't possibly impart to you everything that I've learned about blogging. So I will try and endeavour to do that. But I would really encourage you to ask me questions as I go along to clarify things, because sometimes I think we have the curse of knowledge. You know, I don't know what it's like not to know what I know anymore, and sometimes I just forget. So anyway, with that, this is my blog, which still looks, I'm told, very messy, and I keep getting told that it's very unfashionably cluttered, and but it works. I use WordPress, and I started the blog 5 years ago. I started the blog because I actually had a career crisis after I finished my PhD, and I went to see my brother-in-law, who's a very brash American, and he tends to just sort of fly over to the valley every now and then. He works from Melbourne. He has a job in Silicon Valley. He works in Melbourne. Every now and then he gets sick of his job and he says to his wife, "I'm just going to go to the valley and I'll come back with another job." And he does that, and he comes back with a 50 grand pay rise at the same time. So I was naturally fairly interested in how he did this. So I took him out to lunch, and I said, you know, Mark, how do you actually do all that? Mark Nottingham is his name. He's got a Wikipedia page about it, something I don't have yet. So so he's doing better than me. He works with Tim Berners-Lee, actually, on the new internet protocols. You know, he's a really widely known yet strangely invisible man. Okay, so he's known in this community very well. And he said to me, "So just tell me about your career." I said, "Well, I help PhD students, and I don't know." And he said, "Well, where would you like to work?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, this university or that university." And he said to me, "I always hear from you about where you'll work, not what you do." And it took me a really long time to actually understand what he was saying, but he was really saying that old thing about the fact that there's your career and then there's your job. And your job is not your career. They're actually separate things. He made me do a mission statement, and I had to have 4 glasses of white wine before I could actually produce one. And my mission statement is this: that I think the world is pretty troubled, and I think PhD students are doing amazing things, but I think the problem for PhD students is that many of them are stuck in their PhD much longer than they need to be. So my job, my career, is to help PhD students everywhere finish their PhD. And if you think about it, that's a very extensible concept. It's able to be applied to a lot of different things. I apply it all the time in my job. If I get asked to do something, will you sit on the ethics committee? I think, well, is that helping PhD students get their PhD? Maybe. Yeah, okay, I'll do that. The blog is clearly the most clearest manifestation of that, but there's a selfish purpose behind it as well, because as my brother-in-law said after I finished my mission statement, he said, "Great. The problem with you, Inger, is that everyone who knows you knows that you do a great job and that you're an engaging teacher and that you have interesting ideas, but it's only the people who know you. You just got to get more people to know you, and the best way to get more people to know you is to run a blog. Because through a blog you can unfold your expertise and knowledge slowly over time. We can never say all that we know, but we can only unfold it and show it and demonstrate it to people. So in a way, my blog both helps PhD students, which I strongly believe in that mission in my career, but it also unfolds over time my expertise. There's probably people in the room, and I know because a few have come up to me before I started talking, already feel like they know me quite well. Okay, they know me quite well because they see me online and they see me blog, and so that is a really powerful kind of networking tool, the most powerful networking tool there is. Now, Nadine said earlier, you won't get a job by tweeting, which I agree with it. You have to have other things behind you, but I am the poster girl for social media in my country because I did get my job because of my blog. So what my brother-in-law told me is eventually someone will get to know who you are and they'll ring you up and they'll offer you a job. I said, that doesn't happen in universities, okay? You don't understand. They have their agenda, they have their jobs. He goes, no, someone will make a job for you. And I didn't believe him, but I just kept carrying on blogging anyway. And someone rang me up. ANU, which probably don't know very well, Australian National University is the top research university in Australia. So of all the places to ask me to come to work, it's the most perfect place for me, the most perfect fit, the highest proportion of PhD students on campus in the country. Couldn't be better. I got the call from the Deputy Vice-Chancellor. So, I like your blog. Want to come and have a talk? No, it's the call you dream of. So I actually can say it does work in some limited circumstances, but I wouldn't sell that dream to everyone. Now, the other thing that I noticed people asking Nadine was, you know, do I have to do this? Is this extra thing that I have to do? And I'm always conflicted when people ask me about that, because we already do so much, don't we? We're already all so busy. Is it this extra thing you have to do? Does it take a lot of time? Yes, you have to do it, I think, if you want to get some career advantage. In fact, I worry for young academics who go for jobs and there's 800 people applying for the same job. In my university recently, for a linguist position, 800 people applied for that job. Everybody, except for 4 of them, had a PhD. How do you distinguish amongst those 800 people? You know, how do you make the long short list? So unfortunately, I think it's a sad fact of life, and unfortunately it does take a lot of time, so hopefully I can help you with that too, make it a bit quicker. Anyway, this is my blog. First I'll just present you with some research, and then I'm going to talk about some blogging tips. This research I did with Pat Thompson, who runs the fabulous Patter blog. It had a very mouthy title. We changed it to Why Do Academics Blog? And we did a study of a mere 100 blogs. And that's a problem because this is a little heat map of blogs that are being created all the time. You can go on WordPress and you can just see the little lights turn on and you can just watch them sort of sparkle. So that's how many blogs are being created every minute all around the world. 100 blogs, a drop in the ocean. It was a sampling nightmare actually trying to work out which blogs to sample from that. But we managed to do it, and I don't have time to sort of go into the mechanics of that now, but you can read the paper. And we were interested in these common reasons given for blogging. You need to improve your writing. Some of your ideas are dumb. The point of academia is to expand knowledge. Blogging expands your readership. Blogging protects and promotes your ideas. Blogging is reputation. Linking is better than footnotes. Journals and blogs can and should coexist. And what have journals done for you lately? We're interested in the kind of mix of and the discourses that are going on in these statements as well. Like the implication somehow that academic discourse is removed from public discourse. It's not necessarily. That academics talking to academics somehow is bad and wrong, and that we should all be just talking to the public. And so we were sort of interested to see how this advocacy compared with what people were actually doing. So we did a genre analysis, and we found in just a couple of the findings from the paper, what were the most common things that people were blogging about? And actually the most common thing that we found was academics talking about academia, and not in complimentary ways. Second, we saw people disseminating their research findings. We found quite a few descriptions of academic practice, including writing and information. There was really not much activity in below the blue line there. Self-help advice, technical advice, personal reflections, teaching advice, and particularly career advice. So these are opportunities for anyone who thinks that they can fill into these niches, because there's not many people actually working that space at all. But this is really interesting because especially the top finding, academic culture critique, is not what we expected to find at all. And what it did tell us is that academics on blogs are talking to other academics. They're creating a culture and a conversation there that's probably, we think, in some ways similar to what we're doing in journals already. So it's an alternative kind of journal practice. Questions we're interested in is who is the blogger actually who they think they're writing for? And these are the audiences that we thought were happening, although people didn't explicitly say, we just had to guess or just try and work it out from looking back over 10 or 12 different posts to see who that we thought they were addressing. And mostly we thought they were talking to other academics, particularly other academics like themselves. The assumption was there's someone out there who's just like me reading this blog, and it's something I probably think would encourage you to think whether that's necessarily the audience you want to be talking to, because most academics are the specialist niche area expert. And if you want to talk to a broader audience, you maybe want to think beyond just academics like yourself, but maybe you don't. Professionals in a discipline, so if you're in engineering, talking to engineering professionals, for instance, is quite a strong thread. And the educated public broadly considered, so history blogs, linguist blogs, things like this that were demystifying academic concepts for the educated public. And there weren't many blogs for students like Nadine is, like mine is, and there weren't many blogs that was explicitly helping other researchers do their work. So again, I would say that they're categories of opportunity for people who are interested in starting blogs. So that's so those findings are in our paper. And the interesting thing before I move on from that is that this paper is now, I think, third most read in the Studies of Higher Education journal ever. And the next most read paper has been published for 7 years, and this has been out for 2. And it has been downloaded 80 times more than the other papers in that particular issue. 80 times more than the next most downloaded paper, and actually 800 times more than the downloaded paper, the least downloaded paper in that journal issue. Did that make sense? Sorry, I'm still a bit jet lagged. Okay, so there's some people who say that tweeting and blogging increases your readership by about 10 times. So we found that was correct, but that's actually the bottom level estimate. So this is really important for us as academics. Do we think that this is the best paper ever written on this topic ever? Well, of course, we think it's the best. We wrote it. But, you know, it probably isn't. It's certainly not the second best paper ever in studies in higher education, yet that's where it appears on the ranking. And then there's a certain virtuous circle. You open up that journal, you see the rankings on the side, you see ours up high there, and more people click on it. So there's an attention economy around journal papers. It's emergent, but I think it's really strongly there, and it's growing. And so if you're not part of this attention economy, in these traditional metrics, unlike the metrics that Andy's talking about, you are actually probably not performing, or you're going to be outperformed by people who are in this digital space. I don't want to sell a message of fear, I'm just trying to say it as I see it, unfortunately, and I'm happy to take questions on that. Okay, so what do you do? I think one of the most important things to do is to think about, where do you actually fit in? Where's your niche? You could blog about any range of things in your discipline perhaps, but where do you offer most value? What is it that you know? How can you solve somebody who's reading it? How can you solve their problems? If you can write blog posts that solve people's problems, your blog will just take off. There's no better formula I know than that. Now, people have lots of problems in the world. They have problems about how to do things. They have problems about how to find things. So doing things, you can provide sort of how-tos, 5 points on this. That's the kind of blogging I do sometimes. How to find things. I read this book, it's the best book, you should read it. Take it from me, I'm the expert in this field. This book's worth your time, this book isn't. Okay, so how to do things, how to find things. And they also have problems of knowledge. Things that they don't know. Things that they don't know that they don't know. Okay, so these are all areas that academics are really well suited to filling. And personally, I actually find that this is the nicest kind of blogging to be doing, because it's helpful, it's useful, it's pragmatic. Okay, so it's a problem of doing something, a problem of finding something, or a problem about knowing something. And how does your skills help you fit into and offer something for that? Because there will be a niche of people who are interested. And it really, size doesn't really matter. It's who is reading it and how important are they to your network. If the 12 really important people in your network read your blog, then that's still as beneficial as millions of people reading it that can't actually do much for you or talk to you or be part of your community. So the niche is not about the number of people in it, it's about how valuable it is and how valuable you are to the people. Now, when we looked at the blogs, we noticed that most of them didn't have an about page that actually said anything about what the blog would do, who it's for, why you should read it. I think that's one of the really simple lessons you could take away, is if you're going to start a blog, the first page you should write is the about page. Who are you? Why are you suited to answer these questions? What questions are you going to answer? Which ones aren't you going to answer? What is it? What's your place? To map that out carefully. And I think there was some talk before about CVs and online CVs and so on. The about page of your blog can be the most powerful CV ever. That's where I put all my papers. I don't bother updating ResearchGate or academia.edu very often. I do it every now and then, but it is a lot to keep track of.
But I do keep my About page updated because I know that's the strongest Google hit that there is. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So how can you make then a blog that actually sticks, that connects to its community? And it is about community. So it's asking about what communities am I connected to? What problems does this community have? How can my knowledge help this community? Where does this community live? Where do they hang out online? What hashtags do they use on Twitter? I know for me, PhD chat is the most potent hashtag that I could use because that's where my people are hanging out. That's where the students are, I can reach them. So you've got to do your research carefully to think. Thinking in terms of community is a bit of a subtle shift from the way that we're encouraged to think as academics. We're often encouraged to think in very individualistic ways. And when people talk about networking, they talk about them in very instrumental ways, you know. They talk about meeting people for the first time at conferences, the elevator pitch and so on. But they don't often talk about friendship and affection and all these things that actually do bind us in communities together, and shared troubles. So these are the areas I think that you need to sort of understand, research, really think about, and look at what other people are doing as well in those spaces. Because other people's blogs, and this is what we found too, other people's blogs are not the competition. And this is not a way that we're taught to think in academia either. We're taught to think about citation, impact, and ownership all the time, not necessarily about collaboration and cooperation, okay? So I think it's more like this kind of competition than it is like any other kind of, it's friendly. It doesn't really mean much. There's not that much at stake really. People are going to read what they read. Another blog in your space is not something to worry about. It's something to celebrate and embrace and make connections with. It's really, I know I sound Pollyanna-ish, together you do grow stronger if you take this generous attitude towards other bloggers. You can learn from what they do. You can creatively steal ideas from them. They can steal ideas from you. You can give things away. And Pat and I in our paper talked about this as the sort of giant gift economy, and that people were putting out offers, gifts of blog posts, and then also connecting other people to other blogs as a kind of gift. So if you think about it, that you're existing in an attention economy and a gift economy, then what are you giving? What's your value add? And how do you fit in with other people? And how can you promote them? Invite them into your space. So I make sure that I actively promote the good blogs, because I just grow from that. My reputation grows. If I show you something else that's not mine, that's really awesome, you're going to remember me very fondly. That's why I have so many followers on Twitter. That's the essence of the lesson there, is I find cool stuff and I share the cool stuff, and that's all there is to it. Okay, so just being useful and being generous sounds Pollyanna-ish, but I found it works. And it also makes the whole experience in the space a much more friendly place to be. And people ask me often, do you have trouble with trolls? And I don't really. I don't have a highly gendered avatar, and that's deliberate, but I really don't have that much troll. Very rarely does someone say something nasty to me. If they do, I just ignore it. Okay, and I think that's, and if I do, often people will defend me instead of me having to defend myself, because I have taken that approach. So who is the competition? So look at them carefully. What are people already doing? How can you fit in? So a good example of this is the Research Whisperer. People often say to me, oh, they stole your idea, did they? Or how do you actually relate to them? Or are you a part of them? They're friends of mine. We had a conversation quite a few years ago, and they said, oh, we really like what you're doing. And so discussed some of the things that I was doing. Then I said, just use the name, leverage the brand, see if we can make more whisperers. And I'm still would like more whisperers to be around, because as a concept, it's a fairly powerful one. And if you're wondering where I got the name, the students used to call me that. So I then decided that was actually a good name to adopt for my blog. And so the Research Whisperer have their own style. And so they're just like the Thesis Whisperer, but with more money, and they've had that there since the beginning. They blog once a week. They have a very clear idea of who they are and who they're for. So they're blogging for early career academics who are looking for research money, writing research grants, managing your time, managing your budgets, managing your networks, all the sort of things that go with trying to get grant money into the university. That's a really nice example of a niche area. It's expansive enough to be able to bring a lot of other aspects into it, but it's narrow enough for it to be legible, for people to come there for a purpose, to develop an audience. This is not an easy thing to do. It's really not easy to find your niche, and it really takes some work. Thesis Whisperer is my 7th blog. So 7 blogs to get it right. Collaboration, I think, is really important. So this is actually the first thing that I wrote on my blog. And it was sort of a mission statement. So we want to be concise because people have to read a lot. So don't make a post longer than 1,000 words, though sometimes I break that. We want to learn from stories about doing a research degree, but it's not about your topics. I wanted to make that very clear from the very get-go. There's enough journals out there. We're not a how-to guide to doing a thesis, but we'll dish out practical advice and tips. Right? We're not going to tell you what to do, but we're going to tell you what works for us. We don't want to just talk about writing because it's about much more than that. We want to stimulate conversations, so we're going to be opinionated, but we're not going to be obnoxious. You can relax here, no examiners reading it. We can't pay you, but we're not going to rip you off. I wrote this the very first page, and I actually have never changed it. I can't quite believe that. And notice all the use of the we language. There was no we. You didn't know that, did you? It makes it already sound more kind of, you know, relaxed and assertive and everything. There's no we. And that's why I chose the Thesis Whisperer to sound like a newspaper. So if you can make yourself sort of sound like a magazine or a newspaper, make yourself sound like there's more people, then people are more relaxed with it for some reason. And now it's actually true. There is a we. Every second week there's a guest post. So I only have to write every second week, which is, I couldn't keep doing it if I had to do it every week. It just wouldn't be possible. I just don't have that much creative energy. And it takes a year to get a post on the Thesis Whisperer now. That's how many guest posts that I have. I'm blessed with an audience who loves to write. And I got worried about that the other day. I said to a friend, oh, people will be put off from writing for the blog because they've got to wait so long. They said, oh, it's all right. It's just like a top-tier journal now. Oh, Andy, you've got to get that book out so people actually get some credit. And then there's all sorts of other things like, you know, how do you license your content? I've gone for a Creative Commons share-alike attribution license. Okay, so I had to learn about what Creative Commons was and how to license my content. So that means you can take anything off the Thesis Whisperer and use it for anything, so long as you say that I wrote it. Which is, you know, it sounds very generous and kind of a bit scary, but when I went to do my own ebook on Amazon, because I finally decided it was getting too messy in the blog, and people would write to me all the time saying, oh, I just arrived there, which post should I read? And eventually I just put them into an ebook, and I put it out really cheap on Amazon for the price of a coffee. And when I put the ebook on Amazon, Amazon wrote back to me the next day saying, you do not own this content. You have no right. And I thought, well, how do I actually prove that I own this content? I can't actually prove it very easily. So I wrote back to them saying, oh, you'll notice this site has a Creative Commons share-alike attribution license, and I attributed it. And they went, okay. So it's because I shared it, I was able to publish it to, you know, so there's these very strange economies that work online that you have to start being aware of, some of the ins and outs of that. So I put the book online on Amazon, mostly because I just made it to help people. And then I thought, oh, I'll just put it online. I have to pay my fees and charges. It costs me about $400 a year to run the site. And it's paid for way more than that. It's made a really big profit. And then people were asking me for a paper version, which I thought was really anachronistic, but I looked into it. I found a print-on-demand service. I put it out through Lulu, and that sold like hotcakes. And this brings in money per month for me. And now it pays for not only the blog, it pays for all my computer equipment, my phone bill. I buy all my academic books through it. It actually sort of funds all that kind of excess stuff that normally I'd be paying out of my own pocket. And I have enough left over to donate to charity. So I donate to cancer research every month. I donate to Wikipedia. And I actually have a bit of a tax problem, right? Because it's making a bit too much money. So, you know, but good problems, right? Good problems to have. It took a long time. You can see there's 2010. There's 2011, 12, 13, 14. And this is the projected. That looks pretty nice, doesn't it? I don't know. That's what will happen. But that's what WordPress thinks will happen. So this didn't happen. This took 5 years to get to this kind of level. This is a serious investment of time and effort. I wouldn't have kept doing it if I just didn't really enjoy it so much. And so that's the other thing. I think the message that's come from Nadine and Andy as well is that finding ways to enjoy it is really crucial to keeping your interest up in it, because if you're not, it's just a chore on top of a lot of other chores. Okay, so, and also being that generous citizen does pay off. So I've now got 19,000 followers on Twitter, and that was just from reading in the morning the things that I like to read, the things that interest me, and just tweeting them. So I'm really doing my own reading, my own scanning of the web. So it's not extra work for me there. I'm just sharing what I'm reading. You'll notice I've been pretty quiet lately, and that's because I'm not reading very much. So if I'm not reading very much, I don't have very much to share, I'm just not there, and that's okay. You don't have to be there all the time, but consistency does pay off. You can't look at the numbers day by day and start to obsess about them, though. Everyone who blogs will go through that stage, am I right? Okay. So you can sit there and you can just watch the numbers and watch the numbers, and after a while you just can't keep doing that. You've got to recognise that it ebbs and flows, and this pattern here is the posting pattern. You know, so it peaks, and you'll notice that that one peaked at 6,000, this one peaked at 9,000. It's just whatever interests people. If I only wrote about writing, I would be much more popular than I am today. So much more, because every post I do on writing just goes off. But it's not all I want to write about. It's not all that interests me, so I don't do it. Okay, so you can get a lot of information through the back end of a blog. And if you're slightly nerdishly geeky in the numbers, who's falling into that? Am I alone here? I get a bit nerdish. I get a bit analytical. And it will give you a lot of information. And one of the most fascinating information is what they've typed into a search engine. Academic chic. Maybe, you know, Cherry, do you like this, Cherry? Maybe, I don't know. Clever person, oh, that's quite nice. What does part-time PhD mean? How I write a PhD proposal in 1 month. Okay, so great post ideas in here if I'm ever stuck. What are people actually looking for? What do they want me to write? Where are they going when they've read a post? Where are they off to? And this is, of course, and am I sounding very mercenary Australian, but a chance to make some more money? Amazon affiliate store. So if you buy a book that I recommend, Amazon give me 20 cents or thereabouts, maybe, not even that much, maybe 3 cents sometimes. I don't know how they work it out, actually. It's pretty dodgy. But I get some money. I get a gift voucher every month, and I spend that on a book for the blog. So then I'll review those books for the blog. So there's these ways to keep it running financially. And this is really important. I know I sound really mercenary, but over time, if I'd just been spending $400 a year on a loss-making thing that wasn't, you know, my husband is starting to question, why are you doing this? Okay, it clearly gives it, you know, and as sad as it is, money and work are connected together. And when I went, speaking of work, when I took my blog to my new job, it's an asset. It's intellectual property. How do I treat that? I had to go and see a lawyer. That cost me a lot of money. And the lawyer was like, I don't know, I have to send you to another lawyer. So I went to another lawyer. I still don't think they even really knew. These are very new territory that you're in. I had it drafted into my employment contract that ANU do not own the Thesis Whisperer or anything associated with it. And that when I leave, I take it with me, and it's nothing to do with them, but they will give me time to do it. They kind of don't. But they're meant to. And that's in my contract. So that it starts to become this other part of you that you have to, and after 5 years, and when you've got a really big one, and I'm hoping you have my success problems now, these are not insignificant problems. What happens next? Do I keep doing it? I'm still enjoying it. And my Thesis Whisperer in 20 years' time? What does that look like? Do I hand it on to someone else? I don't even know. These are succession planning problems I didn't even think I'd have to have. So I don't want to encourage you to think too much about these future things, but just to highlight to you that problems come out of the woodwork with blogging that you never anticipated. Okay, so this is part of my moderation policy. Since I don't write all the posts, I don't totally agree with them either. I'm always interested in thought-provoking conversation, which is why there's so many points of view in our guest posts. Thesis Whisperers readers do not want to hear bigotry, racism, sexism, plain meanness, or other form of arse-hattery masquerading as critique. And that is a real academic thing, by the way. I will delete any comments I think unfairly attack an author or a commenter. Sometimes I'll delete a commenter because I think it's unnecessarily aggressive. Lowering the tone or linking to content I think is offensive. We occasionally talk about sensitive topic here, and I respect the right for you to post anonymously, but Thesis Whisperer readers want to read polite and interesting conversation. If I think you're using anonymity to be an asshat, you will be deleted. Okay, and now I go and I gaily delete. I deleted someone this morning. I call it after Charlie Stross, I call it the mallet of loving correction. You're out. And it's my blog, it's my space, and I keep it nice. So sue me. If you want to go and argue with someone, go to Reddit. I'm not interested. And I have a really high female readership, really high, and I know that women sometimes feel online quite vulnerable, and there's been a lot of talk about that and a lot of talk about the unfairness of the attention. And so I have the power here, I have the delete key, I'm going to use it. Now, that didn't come necessary for 4 years. I had 1 or 2 persistent trolls, I just got sick of it. And so, you know, so these are the things that you need to sort of anticipate with scale. With scale, things change. How do you get that scale? Well, I think the best way to think about social media for me is thinking about it in terms of place. And David O. White, is it David O. White? Did I get that right, Andy? Who was on the Google Hangout with us? David White. Started the idea of digital residents and digital visitors. And I think this is a really powerful concept. So you're a digital resident if you have friends online and maintain social relationships online. I certainly do that. If you're online for a significant portion of the evening talking to people, you're a resident. If you just go there to do your banking and to look up information, you're not necessarily a resident, you're a visitor. It's fine to be either. But if you're just a visitor, all you need is a shack. Yeah, so you don't need to invest a lot of time in it perhaps. If you're a resident like me, this is my dream house here in Bora Bora, over the water. So you have a mansion. So what does a shack and a mansion look like? So here I'm going to be, I'm not normally prescriptive, but here's what I think are minimum presence. I think it's useful to have a list of a minimum presence. Now, notice I don't have just presence on the university page because they don't really care about us. They really don't. I had a really fantastic colleague, Alison Lee, the most astounding scholar in our area. Her homepage was the only really good collection of all her stuff. You know when someone's just really put everything there, every talk that they've done, linked to every podcast. She died 2 years ago and her page was gone within 48 hours. I was appalled. I'm like, we're an ageing demographic. You know, 50% of academics in Australia are over 50. So why don't we have some sort of academic graveyards online? I don't know. Like, it just seems so tragic. And now she's sort of scattered everywhere over the web. I mean, if you know her work, you'll find her, but you've got to do all that sort of searching. And so, because the university they're not there to maintain our web presence. So if your top Google hit is your university webpage, that's not very robust. Okay, so about me, which Andy kindly showed, I think is really useful. I wouldn't want to rely on Academia, EDU, ResearchGate or any one of those other commercial companies to make my web presence for me either. The value of About Me is that it's a really simple way to just hook everything in. So it's kind of like the switching junction for all your web presences, and there's a number of them on the market. If you've got some basic HTML skills, you can just put up a single page. I think that's all a homepage needs to be. It's a switching station. LinkedIn, you have to be on it. I sit on selection committees in my university. The first place they look is LinkedIn. You've got to have a nice photo there. I would say even get it professionally taken. I would have every list of every publication on there, and I haven't followed my own advice if you go and look at my LinkedIn profile. But it's also very useful if you've got a good bio there. If you go and do a guest talk, you can just send people to it. It's very useful for you to connect. And working out who to connect with in there, I think you've got to connect just with people you know, or else the network isn't really very useful to you. But remember that recruiters are searching in there, actively searching in there. And so you need to put your best foot forward. ResearchGate, Academia, EDU, I'm on the fence, either one. I find ResearchGate a bit cumbersome. I'm with you. It's just it's demanding. It's a bit like Runkeeper. Does anyone use Runkeeper? And it nags you. You thought that 3 days ago that you wanted to do exercise now. It's like, I don't feel like it now, thank you very much. So ResearchGate, very naggy, but, you know, I've noticed people in there who have not taken up any other social media. Has anyone noticed that? Seems to be somehow that's got traction that other sites don't. Google Scholar homepage is just a must. And Orchid I've been meaning to do for ages. I think these things, making yourself legible, making your work findable is the key issue that you've got to address. So there's my About Me page. It's nothing beautiful, just a photo someone took of me in a bookstore, links to all my channels, a few bits and bobs. That took me 20 minutes. Someone was asking what's advice for managing all these spaces. I have a 4 hours set aside on one Friday afternoon a month called filing, and I just write a list in my diary entry of all the things that I meant to do, and when I get to that diary entry I just do all that stuff. I update LinkedIn, I update, so once a month 4 hours should do it, more than do it. Luxury palace option, all of those, that's your minimum, plus an active blog. I've used all the different type of blogging software, and WordPress is the best in my view. Twitter and G+, there's different audiences hanging out in different places. Twitter's more like the pub, right? So it's a bit more open-ended, and someone once said Facebook is for the people you went to school with, and Twitter's for the people you wish you went to school with. And I think that's pretty true. G+ seems to be for people who like to take photos. I don't really get it. But I use Buffer app to automatically send to LinkedIn, to G+, to Twitter. And so I don't have to be in LinkedIn. I don't have to be in G+. I don't want to hang out there, but I just drop things into there, and Buffer app is the way to do it all at once. So it's one-stop shop for that. Channels in other services, and they can be whatever you like. I'm in Instagram, Pinterest, Tumblr, Mendeley, Zotero, Flickr, etc., etc., etc. There's more. I just like them. I have fun there, and I have a theme or a reason for every feed. So in Instagram, I'll talk about Instagram in a minute. In Pinterest, I make silly boards of things like real and fictitious academics. So I put pictures of Harrison Ford and, you know, Big Bang Theory, and then I have an academic fashion board because you've got to, you know, how to decide how to dress. And then I have one for academic profile shots. Well, how do you have your photo taken? Let's workshop that Pinterest style. And I have one that's been really valuable, which has been where people put their degree testaments. So in laundry baskets, on the wall, in cupboards, on the floor, in the bottom of the cat litter tray, because I'm interested in them as physical objects, and I'm actually writing up that paper at the moment. So that's a way for me to gather sort of ethnographic data. The other one I maintain on Tumblr is called Refreshments Will Be Provided, and it's just about academic food. And so I just take a photo of the food and say what had happened, and I ask people to send me pictures. So I have this really great, again, ethnographic data source of food, and it started off as a joke with a friend because I said I was a bit sick of research ethics procedures stopping you doing ethnographic research, and you can put that out on the internet. I said it. And I said I want to do something that doesn't involve people, and food is already at risk of being eaten, so no problem. So it's only people's hands and the food. I can use the data however I like. So it's been a fun and interesting project. So I usually have a reason for every channel. Sometimes it's playful, and sometimes it's more seriously sharing content. And then you can think about possible money making. So I use Amazon affiliate. I don't use Google ads, but a lot of people do, and they make a stream of income, and that supports the blog. And quite frankly, I don't really trust universities to provide us with ongoing job security or anything like that. So this is a way of sort of keeping my hand in other places. Sometimes it's really hard to decide what a social media platform is for. Instagram mystified me for ages. I just couldn't, I thought it was fun. I took photos in it, I played around with the filters, but I couldn't think of a reason for using it, so it sort of languished, and then I'd take it up again. And then I realised a whole bunch of my friends had migrated from Twitter into here, and they weren't really on Twitter anymore, so I wasn't seeing them. And I wanted to hang out with them because they were all the artists and the interesting people. And so I went back into Instagram, and then I realised that the point of Instagram is that it's pointless. And that was remarkably liberating, right? Like, so that means that I could then have a tagline saying, "This academic life, not at all useful." That's what I do in Instagram. I'm not useful. Like everywhere else, I'm kind of useful. Here I'm not useful, I'm just playful, I just put in whatever I like. So I think thinking about these sorts of social media feeds as like places is useful. And there's a post coming up, I think it's in 2 weeks or it might be next week, where I talk about that in some detail about the analogy between Facebook being your lounge room and Twitter being the pub. You know, and so these different ways of understanding then what the social norms are in that space and then how you should perform or act in the space. And so Instagram is much more playful space for that reason, right? So you don't need to build the palace option, but you can partake in some palace things. So the conversation which Andy showed before, so a subject matter blog or an aggregator blog, I would call the conversation an aggregator. Where it sort of takes a whole lot of other posts together and it's kind of a newspaper format. So it's very easy to get involved with that, very easy for people to write for my blog for that matter. You just contact the editor and you just pitch a story, and the idea is that you're saying why this story is relevant, why people would want to read it, and that's how newspapers work. And thinking about newspapers and thinking about radio stations is a really useful, you know, and thinking about places are really useful ways to think about these digital spaces because they're connected to something we already know. So you can think about Twitter as a radio station. My Twitter radio station is just PhD channel. That's all I talk about there. And if I want to talk about other things, I do it somewhere else. Okay, so, and likewise, every blog, every successful blog will have, you know, a reason for being and a strong idea of what content they want. So you pitch a story that's relevant, and then you can ride on that. You can put it in your LinkedIn. You can, and you know, and take it from me, all blog owners are hungry for content, desperate for content, happy for content to be given to them. And this is probably my last slide, and I'll take some questions. But it's a conversation. And it's a dialogue, it's not a monologue. And the number of times I see people making this mistake kind of astounds me. In here you can see all the tweets from a 2-hour period, seems like a lot, right? But only the ones circled in red could anyone see. These ones that have someone's name at the start, for those of you who aren't on Twitter, if you put someone's name at the start of the tweet, only people who are following both of you will see it. So again, it's like the pub. I'm standing at a table having a drink with FlexNib, and we're chatting about something, and you might walk past and see me and FlexNib talking, but you might be at the other side of the pub. You might follow me, or you might follow FlexNib. You won't see us talking. Okay, so you're not shouting all the time, you're not being overly active, but it means that people can see you talk to other people. And if you think about it, this is a really important way to get to know who someone is. If you watch a person talk to someone else, it often tells you more detail about that person than if they're talking to you, which is why we take people home to meet our parents, right? It's lots more data. We can see that person talk to our parents, and we can see that parents talk to that person. So you get to know who people are and how they behave by watching them interact with other people. And these sort of social norms just don't disappear online. They're in fact more present, I think, in some ways than they are offline. So in summary, be short, be regular, be useful. That's all I have to say. I think I've got a quarter of an hour to take questions. Yep.
Just a basic question. If you blog your research, are you not stymieing your chances of getting it published in so-called reputable journals?
Sometimes, yes. So when I blog about my research, and I've been doing it recently, I blog in order to actually gather more participant data. So I've been doing a study of why people quit the PhD, and that's a narrative study. So I've been looking at snippets of what people say about quitting. And so I wrote about what I was finding out in order to tease out more information from people. So it was a way of writing about the research without writing the research. And I think there's lots of opportunities to do that. And it's strengthened, so you can write about method, you can write about one particular finding and your questions about it, rather than think about it as a publishing platform, think about it as a dialogue. Up the back.
Can you help with I don't know quite what the issue is, but I started a blog of photographs of people sleeping in public places.
Right.
On trains, airports and parks.
Yes.
And I got told that I couldn't publish those photographs because I didn't get the permission from these people. And I've never been able to disentangle quite what the legal issue is.
There's a good book called Blogging and Tweeting Without Being Sued. That will give you the answer. Read it, it's a really good reading. Yeah. Definitely in academic settings, without ethics approval, that would be a no-no, which is why I do the food. Yeah. Question over here.
Sorry, I've been trying to ask this question, but I think you've given me the answer,
Yeah.
some of the answer already. I was going to ask a question about blogging. I'm a second year PhD student.
Yeah.
I've never managed to start
Yes.
a blog.
Yes.
It's quite scary because
Yeah.
having seen what you've done now, it's even more scarier.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to start, I'm thinking, okay, what do I write? Where do I start?
Yeah.
Who am I talking to? Who are the
Yeah.
audience? But now you've addressed that.
Yeah.
My question now then is,
Yeah.
if I start blogging, because your one has a lot of people following, how do you SEO it?
Do I what, sorry?
SEO it, like site optimize it?
Do I site optimize? Oh,
Yeah, SEO.
search engine optimization.
Yeah.
No, I never have. I just write good content
Okay.
and publish good content, and I publicise it on Twitter. So good. That will drive up Google. What drives up Google more than anything else is people linking to your blog, and linking is a sign of that they like it. For most people, so that will drive you up naturally. And it didn't take me very long actually to get quite up there, and that's just Twitter.
Okay.
If you've got a blog and you're not using Twitter, you just really won't be leveraging it. But I would question whether you need to start a blog when you're a PhD student. I would question that.
Okay.
And I would really think about where you want to spend your energy and whether you want to start writing, say, for the conversation, because professional editors will edit you and you can learn a lot from that.
Okay.
And you can also think about your professional identity. You have the luxury of thinking about where you fit in. It doesn't mean you can't be writing one that's... I wrote 12 or 13 posts before I put it public. So it was locked, you know. So I was playing around with the format, and I didn't actually publish the blog until there was content. So people didn't... You know how you click on a blog, you go, what a great post, and then there's nothing to go back to. So I wanted to make sure I put it out there with some batch content on there. So I would think about... You know, you don't need to rush in, that there's ways to participate that you can learn from and concentrate on getting your PhD done. But that's the mission talking, so your mileage may vary.
Yeah.
Question behind.
Hi, basic question. You just mentioned sort of using the blog as a research method to collect data.
Yeah.
What's the ethical issues with that, and what do you have to do on your blog? Because you're collecting personal information from people, and they need to be aware of that, obviously.
So it's on my moderation policy that I do use the blog for research purposes, which is one other reason I put the moderation policy up. I've checked it through with my both ethics, and ethics committees vary, which is infuriating. So the current thinking in the current ethics committee that I work with is that in a public blog, in a public forum, it's like letters to a newspaper and therefore okay. But if I'm soliciting it directly, it's not okay. So if someone happens to comment on something I do, fine. If I say, please send me information on X, it's not fine.
So it's like entrapment, it can be.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I would encourage you to talk to your ethics committee, because my experience is that their interpretations vary widely on what's acceptable and what isn't. Question, Nadine.
Obviously your blog is huge, right? And I think a lot of what you've said, you've acknowledged that that's some of the problems you've run into, or decisions you've had to make, is because it's so big.
Size effects, yeah.
A lot of what I've heard people ask is they immediately want to know, how do you get so many followers? How do you do this? I wonder if you can say a little bit more about maybe the benefits and the enticing aspects of actually you just start a blog. It doesn't matter if you have 10 readers. That's how you're going to start. That's how
That's what I was trying to say with the slow burn and showing you that it took years. It took years to build that size. And sorry, it's a bit hot up here. It took years to build that size, and what I tried to concentrate on all that time, and sometimes it's really hard, especially when someone else brings out a really good blog and you think, oh my God, Pat Thompson's blogging, that's it, I'm finished. Thesis Whisperers, over, you know. And then I thought, well, I really admire Pat Thompson, I'm just going to make friends with her. And actually we've become great friends. So, you know, there's that whole aspect to it. But I would just say, and it sounds simple, but it's not, is the quality. The quality is the most important thing. it's just no point blogging for the sake of it. If you write good quality content, stuff you would want to read, then that, and you just do even a minimum of putting it on Twitter, you will succeed. I have no doubt about it. The other thing that I think is important is sending certain signals about professionalism. It's typos, it's it's quality of the prose. So it's a really good opportunity to get to craft your writing and become a much better writer. And I think the regular thing is really important. So having a schedule, you go, I'm going to publish every Wednesday, or I'm going to publish once every 6 months on the last Thursday of the month. It doesn't actually really matter what the schedule is, as long as it's regular. There's one blog called Sell Out Your Soul, which I love, and he blogs once every 6 months, and I hang out for it because it's a 4,000 word piece of absolute gold, and I will hang on everything that guy says because he's really thought about it. In 6 months he gives you this amazing gift. So that's all I would say, is that the quality of the content is, and so that's why it needs time. And people say, how long does it take to write a blog post? Anywhere between 1 hour, when the muse is with me and I'm just like, that's a great idea, bang. And weeks, months, never. Like, I have this queue, it's got 60 half-finished blog posts in it. Occasionally I go through and I just chuck them out because I find I wrote them somewhere else or whatever, although I've never managed to make that idea work. And I really, really thought that I had about 6 months of blogging in me. I really thought that. Now I can't see the end of it, because writing makes, even in a kind of tiny subject area like mine, writing creates ideas and creates the content. And the community ask you for things. So we have a thread on Twitter, if you're on Twitter called Tabit, T-A-B-I-T. Some of us bloggers follow it. There's a blog post in that. Because I was so fond of saying that, people would talk to me and go, there's a blog post in that. And so my friends started to joke about that I needed a t-shirt with #Tabit on it. So we started Tabit. And so sometimes I'll write, there's a blog Tabit, and then someone else will blog it. So there's, if you're in a community and you're talking to them, you'll never run out of ideas. And it really does sharpen your writing practice. So even as a pleasurable end in itself, and it's not that tedious referencing and that tedious, I really don't like writing journal papers in that sort of laboured, mannered kind of way. It's fresh, you can have a bit of fun with it. Well, I do. So for its own sake, I think it's worth taking up. Your mileage may vary. You silly.
I think you mentioned that you had some earlier blogs.
Yes.
What happened to them?
They were bad. Some of them were bad. I did maintain a couple of blogs about my research work, and they were boring. They even bored me, so I kind of stopped. The one blog that I did keep going for quite some time was about my son when he was a baby, and instead of writing an email to all the distant relatives, I'd write a blog post, and that went on for quite a while, and lots of people really liked that. My friends were really into it because I was saying, and I've since shown my son the whole blog, which catalogues 2 years of his life, quite frequently me complaining about his nappies and why he doesn't sleep. He thought it was absolutely hysterical, luckily. Now he's 13, he thought it was the funniest thing ever. So that, and because that was a cathartic, therapeutic, close to my heart, that gave me the lesson that what I needed to do for a blog was actually really write from that space where I'm interested in it and into it. And so every other blog seemed to be very much like writing academic papers, just sort of boring. So yeah, they kind of exist, but I've tried to mothball them all off as much as possible. But, so I think, but there's a lesson there. And, they talk about entrepreneurs just, having failures, and I think you do learn a lot from the failures, it's true. So it's why you sort of want to think about when you're a PhD student, how you can experiment with low impact, low future impact. Question?
Well, first thing what I'd like to say would be a comment. I think Wikipedia is a good example of this. That it's been a largely academic discourse here today, for so rightly so, and there is the need for the academic discourse to be sustained by peer review and so on. But there's people can say look down too much on there's non-referee things, and Wikipedia is a good example of that. That precisely because it's so open, if there's rubbish up there, it quickly writes itself up at 999 times out of 1,000. And it was a resource that was mentioned to us in postgrad maths courses in the University of London. So that too much of a
Wikipedia was.
Wikipedia was, because you know, if you go to Wikipedia about all sorts of the content there is good. As a mathematician, I can claim the maths there. You know, mostly, maybe not always, but mostly, it sounds so there can be too much sort of academic sort of snobbery, indeed. So that's just a general remark. And the question is, as I said, you know, there's been Twitter has been the most mentioned web social media as an entity here today, but by far. And thank you for all that you've said. What would you recommend? What would you say would be the best intro, the best book introducing people? If you were to say, like me, I'm just starting on Twitter, what would you say would be the best introduction, the best books about Twitter, introducing it to relatively new people?
Yeah, there's not necessarily books, but there are online resources for Twitter. I think LSE Impact Blog released a handbook, the London School of Economics Impact Blog released a handbook that was really useful, and I use that a lot in my teaching. The best advice that I would give you though is find an area that you're interested in. So if you're interested in knitting or cooking or dogs or something, search Twitter for those things. Follow people who are talking about the things that you actually find interesting in your personal life. And you don't have to tweet, but you can look at how people behave, what they're talking about. But it'll make you want to go there, because you'll be going for something that isn't work. And that's been the most effective way that I've introduced people to social media, is to say go there to play first, then see how you might want to use it for work or not. You know, you don't have to be on Twitter. Like I say, you can use Buffer app and you can never be on Twitter. It can be there for you. Yeah.
There are some really good PDF handbooks created by researchers who kind of review every social media platform and tell you what's good about it, what maybe not good about it. I tweeted a link about it earlier, ironically, so you won't be able to see that.
But the best way, I think, is to play. Like in Pinterest, I'm building a house, so I'm looking at all the mud rooms and kitchens and stuff. I use them for that. I actually use social media more to socialise than I use it for work. And I use it a lot for work, so that probably tells you something. But the first thing I did when I got here in England is get myself connected, or else I just feel like I'm not. Which is, people see it's sad and everything, but I'm happy. I still have friends in real life as well. In fact, there's been a few people who come up, tell me wherever you are in the crowd, who actually I've known for a long time online. And when I meet them in person, they're exactly as I expect them to be. It's the oddest thing, yeah. So it's a good way to make friends, actually. I wouldn't be standing here today if it wasn't for Twitter, there's no doubt about that. There's a question right back there in the Dean, sorry.
I just wanted to comment really quickly. I do think it's important to talk about disciplinary differences. It's very different if you blog about qualitative research and data, which I never do. I blog about things that I find, novels that I read and things, which don't take the same shape as the article or monograph. I talk very differently about them. And I don't think at all that my publishers would take issue with that, as long as I haven't published the entire introduction to my book word for word. So I think there's this. Which
wouldn't make a good blog post probably anyway,
no.
Right?
Far from it.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point.
For the speed thing, it is worth saying that things are changing slowly but surely in the publishing landscape. So for the humanities, there is going to be the Open Library for Humanities, which is going to turn articles around so much quicker. So there are lots and lots of open access journals springing up, and do look out for them and use them. Don't be the snob that will say, but is my research worth as much if it's published in this new open access journal than it is somewhere else? If we do that, then we'll never get anywhere, will we?
Yeah.
So there is, look out for that.
Yeah,
that will mean it will be published when it's ready. And a lot of journals now do publication online as soon as the article's final.
Yes.
So you don't have to wait for the print roll.
But my favourite journal's still 2 years, even to online.
Right, really.
And also I found with PhD students often tend to follow supervisors, so we need our older leaders to be leading the way on this, because those of us who are at the bottom of the hierarchy are taking more of a risk with these new forms, because we're not as established. So that's why the cost of knowledge petition I signed eagerly, because I thought that was a good example of leadership. There's a question right at the back.
Yeah, so two pieces of information. One is something you just said. I'm sure you probably all know now that for for the ref, for the 2020 ref, every article or book that's going to be published into that needs to be published open access.
Right.
Open access. But what you publish is not what's in the journal. You publish your second to last edit before what went into the journal.
That depends on the journal.
No, this is ref.
It does. Not
this is
every.
ref rules. These are not ref rules. The ref requires that you publish.
Yeah, I know. But it depends on the journal. Sorry, this is fine detail. But it depends on the journal which one you are allowed to make open access.
Oh, which one the journal would allow you, whether they would allow you to publish the last one.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So that was one piece of information. The other thing is that in our research, a lot of times we generate a lot of information that we're not going to put in our thesis or it's not going to be in our paper side stuff.
Yeah.
So, for example, I work on Shakespeare's influence on Marx and Freud, but I get a lot of stuff about translation, which I'm never going to write papers about.
Yeah.
So I blog a lot of times about that stuff.
Yeah. Great idea.
It gets attention to my research, but it's not anything I'm
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I try to do as well, is to find the adjacent possible domains of what I've generated along the way, because you're right, the journal paper is this tiny edited sort of bit. And literature reviews, I mean, a lot of what you generate for a literature review you don't use, I find, and that can also make good blog posts, and it's a good community service for people to do some reading for them, I think, because we're all so swamped. One last question up the back and then I'm going to stop.
I just feel the open access thing people may be misled, because there's an awful lot of predatory journals around. There's even a website that lists them.
Bill's list,
they say we do all this open access, you get reviews, you get this quick publication, you go through that process, and then they say, and by the way, it's going to cost you $1,000.
Yeah, and there's also predatory conference organisers as well. This is a new thing, so yeah. There's a lot of literacies that we have to, and I would again raise the question of who's doing the training, and we do it for free all the time. There's not enough serious sort of effort put into funding.